Hey, good evening. Before I get started with this, I want to say that I know I'm not employed. I'm not employed as a teacher at any particular church. I still got plenty that I need to learn. Some things change over time, but His Word is never changing. But I just wanted to share. I felt convicted to share things that I've learned going through the Bible. And the books of the Kings have been an idea of a passion project for me for a while. So with that being said, if any fellow brothers on here, if there's anything I'm wrong at, please feel free to correct me. But His Word is good for that too. As the time approached for David to die, he instructed his son Solomon, "As for me, I am going the way of all the earth. Be strong and brave, and keep your obligation to the Lord your God, to walk in His ways and to keep His statutes, commandments, judgments, and testimonies." And oh boy, we're going to get to judgments. This is written in the law of Moses, so that you will have success in everything you do and wherever you turn. And so the Lord will carry out His promise that He made to me. If your sons are careful to walk faithfully before me with their whole mind and heart, you will never fail to have a man on the throne of Israel. So David is about to die, and he's giving Solomon these last instructions before he goes. And perhaps David sensed that there was some weakness to Solomon, because he encouraged him to be strong and brave. So David knew that he needed that and encouraged him. Because great responsibilities require great strength and courage. But the most important thing that he reminded Solomon was to keep your obligation to the Lord your God. Because David knew that Solomon could not be strong or courageous without close fellowship with God and obedient, above all else, fellowship with God. And David had a general reason to exhort Solomon to obedience, but he also had a very specific reason. A specific promise from God, which was, if your sons are careful to walk faithfully before me with their whole mind and heart, you will never fail to have a man on the throne of Israel. And unfortunately, a lot of David's descendants did not do that, but the Lord kept the line of David. And Jesus comes from the line of David, and He fulfilled that walk permanently. So the line of David will always have a man on the throne of Israel. You also know what Joab, son of Zeruiah, did to me, and what he did to the two commanders of Israel's army, Abner, son of Ner, and Amasa, son of Jether. He murdered them in a time of peace to avenge blood shed in war. He spilled that blood on his own waistband and on the sandals of his feet. Act according to your wisdom, and do not let his gray head descend to Sheol in peace. Show loyalty to the sons of Barzillai, the Gileadite, and let them be among those who eat at your table, because they supported me when I fled from your brother Absalom. Keep an eye on Shimei, son of Gera, the Benjaminite from Bahurim, who is with you. He uttered malicious curses against me the day I went to Mahanaim. But he came down to meet me at the Jordan River, and I swore to him by the Lord, I will never kill you with the sword. So don't let him go unpunished, for you are a wise man. You know how to deal with him to bring his gray head down to Sheol with blood." So right here, David wanted Solomon to begin his reign with justice. That's it. Just to dilute the artificial sweetener a bit. So the first person that he instructed him to deliver justice upon was the general of David's army, Joab. Because before David fully took the throne, Israel and Judah had a little civil war. Basically, some tribes of Israel did not recognize David, while other tribes did, and that was a 7-year period. And obviously, the tribe that recognized David won that war. But Joab was guilty of murdering these commanders during peacetime. Joab, and he's one of the more complex characters of the Old Testament. He was loyal to David, but he wasn't always loyal to David's wishes. He acted on what he thought was in David's best interests when David didn't want those things to happen, and he was just cunning and ruthless to try to further his own position. It's important to note here that David didn't mention Joab's killing of Absalom. And by the way, I'm reading partially from the Guzik or Enduring Word Blue Letter Bible Commentary. And that's because everybody and their mother or brother has done a commentary on Romans. But good luck finding anybody who's done Amos or Nahum all the way through. David didn't mention Joab's killing of Absalom, which David had commanded him not to do. And perhaps by this time David recognized that Absalom did in fact have to die for his treason and attempted coup against David. And there are many people who think that David did not demand Joab's execution during his lifetime because Joab knew about the murder of Uriah, who, as I said earlier, was the husband of the woman that David had an affair with, Bathsheba. And the idea is that Joab used this murder knowledge as blackmail against David. That's speculation. It could be true. And at the very least, David knew of Joab's loyalty and the sacrifices that he made for him over the years. And David may have felt under obligation to him, and though David was not lacking in courage, he was just really difficult to handle the mixture of Joab's loyalty and his misdeeds. And David also didn't want Solomon to just bring the sword down on people. He also wanted him to show justice in the form of kindness. He wanted Solomon to do justice to those who helped David in his time of need when he fled from Absalom, which was Barzillai the Gileadite. Told him that he should always have, him and his family should all... Just his family too? The sons of Barzillai the Gileadite, and let them be among those who eat at your table. And to eat at the king's table in ancient times was the equivalent of having a pension. The beneficiary of receiving a regular royal allowance of food and clothing with a house and land to support that person and their family. Well, specifically his family. And David had vowed that he would not kill Shimei. Shimei threw rocks at David and insulted him while he was on the run from Absalom. Shimei had previously belonged to the house of Saul and was probably still resentful that David was the king. And it was right for David to keep his vow, but it was also right for him to make sure that Shimei received justice without David breaking his vow. Then David rested with his fathers and was buried in the city of David. The length of time David reigned over Israel was 40 years. He reigned 7 years in Hebron and 33 years in Jerusalem. Solomon sat on the throne of his father David, and his kingship was firmly established. It's pretty much self-explanatory. But when Solomon's reign began, that was the kickoff to probably the best material period in Israel's history, but the spiritual was noticeably absent. In the business, we call this foreshadowing. Now Adonijah, son of Haggith, came to Bathsheba, Solomon's mother. She asked, "Do you come peacefully?" "Peacefully," he replied. And then asked, "May I talk with you?" "Go ahead," she answered. "You know the kingship was mine," he said. "All Israel expected me to be king. But then the kingship was turned over to my brother, for the Lord gave it to him. So now I have just one request of you. Don't turn me down." She said to him, "Go on." He replied, "Please speak to King Solomon, since he won't turn you down. Let him give me Abishag the Shunammite as a wife." "Very well," Bathsheba replied. "I will speak to the king for you." And asking Adonijah if he came in peace is a valid question, because he really just tried to usurp the kingdom before Solomon was made officially the king. And he may have had legitimate reason from that to want revenge on Bathsheba, because she and Nathan conspired against him in that regard when he tried to usurp the throne. And he's an arrogant man. He's telling this woman that, "You know the kingdom is mine, and all Israel expected me to be the king." He's suffering from delusions of, well, not really suffering, but he has illusions of grandeur. He imagined that there was like this widespread popular support for him to be the king, when in reality it was only a handful of influential people who backed him. And then when David favored Solomon, they quickly abandoned him. And he's asking for Abishag, and this is where I disagree with the commentary. They believe that Abishag was made a concubine of David during his last days, but she only laid beside the king to keep him warm. And it full on said at the end of that particular part of chapter 1 that he was not intimate with her. But still, the idea that she laid down with the king, Adonijah may have wanted to take her as a wife, as a symbol that he was asserting a claim to the throne. Because back when Absalom tried to attempt a coup against David, when David went on the run, he had sex with all of David's concubines in front of all of Israel. So basically he was taking part of his dad's harem of women, so that was him as trying to assert his claim to the throne, saying, "I'm the man now." And back in those days, among the ancient Persians and the Arabs, the new king took the harem of the previous king. So There's historical examples of that. So Bathsheba went to King Solomon to speak to him about Adonijah. The king stood up to greet her, bowed to her, sat down on his throne, and had a throne placed for the king's mother. So she sat down at his right hand. Then she said, "I have just one small request of you. Don't turn me down." "Go ahead and ask, mother," the king replied. I won't turn you down. So she said, "Let Abishag the Shunammite be given to your brother Adonijah as a wife." And she knew this was not one small thing, so there may have been a little bit of a hint of sarcasm in the question. She knew it was an outrageous request, but yet she still brought it to Solomon because she probably figured it was best that he knew what his brother was up to. King Solomon answered his mother, "Why are you requesting Abishag the Shunammite for Adonijah? Since he is my elder brother, you might as well ask him for the kingship. You might as well ask the kingship for him, for Abiathar the priest, and for Joab son of Zeruiah." Then Solomon took an oath by the Lord, "May God punish me and do so severely if Adonijah has not made this request at the cost of his life. And now as the Lord lives, the one who has established me, seated me on the throne of my father David, and made me a dynasty as he promised, I swear Adonijah will be put to death today." Then King Solomon gave the order to Benaiah son of Jehoiada, who struck down Adonijah, and he died. Previously, Adonijah had been begging for his life. And Solomon made him promise that after Solomon spared him, he said that if he is a man of character, then not a single hair of his will fall to the ground. But if evil is found in him, then he dies. And Adonijah had just made a wicked, treasonous request, and he was executed because of it. And that's time kind of a thing to know. Solomon's probably like 19 years old at this time, by the way. And what were we doing at 19? The king said to Abiathar the priest, "Get to your fields in Anathoth. Even though you deserve to die, I will not put you to death today, since you carried the ark of the Lord God in the presence of my father David, and you suffered through all my fathers suffered." So Solomon banished Abiathar from being the Lord's priest, and it fulfilled the Lord's prophecy he had spoken at Shiloh against Eli's family. And Solomon showed great mercy and wisdom to Abiathar, because Abiathar did deserve death because he supported Adonijah as the next king in defiance of the will of God, first of all, and the will of King David. This is treason against both God and the king of Israel. But mercy was shown in sparing Abiathar's life in light of his past standing as a chief priest and a supporter of David. And wisdom was shown in exiling him. Solomon banished him. And the prophecy references the end that was spoken at Shiloh against Eli's family. This refers to prophecies that happened in 1 Samuel. Because Eli was the high priest of Israel at the time, but his sons were coming up after him, and they were abusing their position. And so God made the promise and a prophecy that Eli's family would no longer be serving in that position. And with Abiathar exiled, the line of Eli's family in the Levitical high priesthood ended. And this prophecy was made just some 100 years before Solomon took the throne. The news reached Joab. Since he had supported Adonijah but not Absalom, Joab fled to the Lord's tabernacle and took hold of the horns of the altar. It was reported to King Solomon, Joab has fled to the Lord's tabernacle and is now beside the altar. Then Solomon sent Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, and told him, go and strike him down. So Benaiah went to the tabernacle and said to Joab, this is what the king says, come out. But Joab said, no, for I will die here. So Benaiah took a message back to the king. This is what Joab said, and this is how he answered me. The king said to him, do just as he says. Strike him down and bury him in order to remove from me and from my father's house the blood that Joab shed without just cause. The Lord will bring back his own blood on his own head, because he struck down 2 men more righteous and better than he, without my father David's knowledge. With his sword Joab murdered Abner, son of Ner, commander of Israel's army, and Amasa, son of Jether, commander of Judah's army. Their blood will come back on Joab's head and on the head of his descendants forever. But for David, his descendants, his dynasty and his throne, there will be peace from the Lord forever. Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, went up, struck down Joab, and put him to death. He was buried at his house in the wilderness. Then the king appointed Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, in Joab's place over the army, and he supported Zadok the priest in Abiathar's place. Yeah, Joab hardly, very seldom ever approached the altar before, seemingly. As far as we know, he had little respect for religion during his lifetime. He was a rough man of war and cared little enough about God or the tabernacle or the priests or the altar. But when he was in danger, he fled to that which he had avoided and sought to make a refuge of that which he had neglected. And although it was an ancient custom in the ancient world to find sanctuary at a holy altar, Solomon knew that this custom was not used in Israel to protect a guilty man. Because in Exodus 21:14, it says, but if a man acts with premeditation against his neighbor to kill him by treachery, you shall take him from my altar, that he may die. Since Joab refused to leave, Solomon had him executed right at the altar. And it basically would have been an insult to justice to have not taken the life of Joab. David was culpable in delaying it for a really long time, but it is likely that the circumstances of his government would not allow him to do it sooner. Now comes Shimei's turn. Then the king summoned Shimei and said to him, build a house for yourself in Jerusalem and live there. But don't leave there and go anywhere else. On the day you leave and cross the Kidron Valley, know for sure that you will certainly die. Your blood will be on your own head. Shimei said to the king, The sentence is fair. Your servant will do as my lord the king has spoken. And Shimei lived in Jerusalem for a long time. But then at the end of 3 years, 2 of Shimei's slaves ran away to Achish, son of Maacah, king of Gath. Shimei was informed, look, your slaves are in Gath. So Shimei saddled his donkey and set out to Achish at Gath to search for his slaves. He went and brought them back from Gath. It was reported to Solomon that Shimei had gone from Jerusalem to Gath and had returned. So the king summoned Shimei and said to him, didn't I make you swear by the Lord and warn you, saying, on the day you leave and go anywhere else, know for sure that you will certainly die? And you said to me, the sentence is fair, I will obey? So why have you not kept the Lord's oath and the command that I gave you? The king also said, you yourself know all the evil that you did to my father David. Therefore, the Lord has brought back your evil on your head. But King Solomon will be blessed, and David's throne will remain established before the Lord forever. Then the king commanded Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, and he went out and struck Shimei down, and he died. So the kingdom was established in Solomon's hand. Shimei knew that Solomon was very generous and merciful to him. He not only agreed with the arrangement of exile, but he was grateful for it. Well, essentially, he placed him under house arrest. Solomon had extended mercy, but Shimei abused it and took advantage of it. It seems to have been mainly a matter of neglect or forgetfulness, but it was criminal to neglect or forget a royal covenant. So the main story of this chapter is that things come back around. God will not be mocked, and I pray that neither you nor I would do anything to have that come back around to us. God bless.